Ladies and gentlemen, let's ReGamingTech.com video. Kickstarter pledges are in decline. Crowdfunding is becoming less and less popular among gamers, particularly in 2014. So this was a study by games consultancy firm ICO Partners, that's ICO Partners. And they've basically measured the total amount of pledges to video game Kickstarters in 2014, and then they've compared that to the first half of 2013. So while 58 million was pledged in video campaigns in 2013, only 13.5 million was pledged in the first half of 2014. So that's an estimated total of 27 million in 2014 if the patterns continue in the second half of the year. So if we continue with this same pattern, 446 Kickstarter campaigns were successful in 2014, and there were 175 in the first half of 2014. So if you continue with that logical progression, there's going to be 350. So 350, you know, is only around 100 less than 446, roughly rounding it up, which is a fairly small decline, but it's still a decline. I'm sure you'll agree. But why is this? Well, ICO Partners analyst Thomas Bidax did believe it's for a multiple couple of reasons. There are smaller, or should I say fewer, big ticket campaigns. There's also a huge amount of skepticism thanks to, well, consistently failing projects. And, well, Steam Early Access is also being a big deal as well. Developers are pushing towards early access because it actually requires what they consider to be less work than Kickstarter campaigns. Kickstarter campaigns, it's very much like you've got to hope that you're in the limelight. Kickstarter campaigns are becoming harder. Now, it's weird because Kickstarter themselves is starting to get fairly flooded. Early access as well is having the same issue. The idea of early access, however, is that at least you get something. The game might never ever be finished, and that's something that you're going to have to mentally deal with. There are tons of games, pretty famous examples of games, where their funding was just cut, or the developer just basically just keeps on and on going on that, you know, the game will eventually be finished, but it never really seems to come to fruition. One of the more famous examples, of course, being Towns. Oftentimes it's simply because the sales of the title dry up, or the developer loses interest, or some more skeptical people, and in some cases this is damn right true, will know that it's merely a cash-in. In other words, they do the bare minimal work. So there is that danger as well, particularly since, let's just be totally and utterly blunt here, Steam's marketplace is fairly saturated with early access games. In fact, what used to be a, well, fairly minority, now it's turning into a fairly large majority. It's also worth remembering that there were so many really large campaigns in 2013. There seems to be fewer in 2014, fewer which people are starting to rally behind. And I mean, I'm in two minds about this personally, and it was only last month that Kickstarter actually changed their TOS, terms of service and agreements, and they basically stated, I'm just going to surmise this, that this isn't an agreement that you're entering into. You are not paying for a product. You are not paying. It's not like, you know, me going over to you, seeing that you have a can of beans, giving you $1 for your can of beans, and then you saying, okay, now you possess this can of beans. I'm giving you money. I'm giving you an investment on the idea, on the premise that you're going to give me a can of beans, that you're going to create a can of beans. But the can of beans is a theoretical can of beans, and I might never get that can of beans. So those changes of service are there to try and help to make things a lot clearer, because people are getting quite, well, let's just cut the mustard here and say pissed. I think people go into the mindset of, I've got something, I've put money into this bloody thing. In some cases, let's be totally and utterly honest here, it's not like you're giving $1. Some of the prices can be quite expensive, particularly if you really love the idea of a game, if you're heavily emotionally and invested in it. So let's say that there's a remake of it, or a clone or a spiritual successor of a game that you really like the look of, then you will invest a heavy amount of money in some cases. I have friends who have actually invested 100, 200, 300 pounds in a campaign, I kid you not. Sure, there are others who just give a couple of bucks here and there, and there are others who will give a lot of money. One of the guys on the channel, he actually said sometimes that he'll forget that he's pledged 2 or 3 campaigns, and then he'll check his bank balance. He's like, what the hell? You know, where the hell did my cash go? And then he realizes, oh, that's when this game's coming out, and this game's coming out, and this game's coming out, and he realizes that, you know, £200-300 in some cases has come out of his bank a month, and now he's doing that less and less simply because of this, and he's certainly not the only one. Early access, it has its problems, and it's certainly something that we could discuss until the end of time, whether morally companies should be so focused on it. And I definitely feel that early access should be better monitored than what it is, because let's face it, right now it's a minefield. Some of the engines have been broken well beyond belief. You've got games which are at best using assets of previous games, or they're being, and you know, you probably have heard to the point where it's not even worth me rattling on about the moderation of comments in the forums, or the you know, the briberies that are going on, or even in some cases, for example, Total Biscuit has had issues with copyright. It's just a mess in some cases for early access. And you've also got the other problem from the point of view of reviewers. How do you review those games? Because early access can almost be like me saying to you, well, if I say to you my product's in early access, it's effectively like saying you're buying into an alpha or beta, right? But then if a feature is missing, I can't be criticized really on that. I can, you know, people can say, well, you know, the feature's not in, but then I can counter and say, yeah, but you're buying early access, and of course it's not in. It's early access. You know, I'll put it in eventually, but because oftentimes there's no time frame and it's not accountable, and that's kind of the problem here. So once again, with the green light, and that's another thing. Self-publishing is now becoming a big thing on Steam as well. Now, I don't necessarily know how I feel about this. In some ways, it's really good, because it means that there's certain games and certain projects. For example, would Oculus have ever gotten off the ground without, well, Kickstarter? Probably not. But at the same time, simultaneously, I feel that it can be a very tricky thing. And I definitely think that Kickstarter's not going anywhere. It's not like it's going to suddenly disappear. And let's face it, Kickstarter does other things other than, well, gaming anyway. But that said, I feel that some studios, it's very difficult. There are certainly some labours of love, and let's face it, Minecraft was very much like a Kickstarter project in and of itself. And definitely that it's not the only one. There are so many games which if it didn't have crowdfunding, they just wouldn't exist, and a lot of indie studios just simply couldn't afford it. At the end of the day, the bottom line is, if you don't have the cash, you can't afford to make the project. And certainly with smaller games, you can accomplish something with 1 or 2 people working on it. But for larger projects, for the more ambitious projects, for those that require texture artists and 3D programmers and God knows what else, it's just simply not going to happen. And even if it's only 2 people working on it, well, unless they're going to be working on it, say 6 PM until 10:30 at night, just for example, and then have no social lives, it can be very difficult. So I think I don't have a problem with the basics of crowdfunding. I do feel that Kickstarter changing their terms of services and making it clearer, it's a positive step. For Steam, however, I do feel that there needs to be more of a quality control system, but this is my opinions are certainly not unique here. It's going to be a bit odd. I think over the next couple of years, things are going to really change in the gaming industry, because what we don't want as well is we don't want larger studios. I'm just giving examples, but we don't want the Ubisofts and Electronic Arts here to start releasing or to start pushing the whole green light access thing, because at the end of the day, I really hate that saying as well, but we don't want situations where we never get products. As consumers, we deserve to be as informed as possible. Obviously, in a case like Kickstarter, if a project simply runs out of money, and sometimes that can happen, I'm not blaming those necessarily, because you might underestimate how much cash you need, for example. And that can happen. Sometimes you might need to go into a couple of Kickstarter campaigns because something really you just didn't realize there was maybe unforeseen circumstances, the work was just too big, especially, and this can happen a lot for inexperienced developers. You know, they've never created a game before, they might have the talent, they might know what they're doing roughly, but they've never developed things, they've never worked in a large team, they don't really understand how long things take to work in a real world scenario, particularly if they've never worked on like larger projects. And it can happen. I'm not saying sometimes there's not mismanagement, however. But yeah, so once again, just to cap off, it is happening. It's not necessarily saying that Kickstarter's dying, and I don't think it ever will. I think it's too popular, but definitely for a lot of developers, the green light or early access or similar routes are definitely preferable to many of them. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.